Hook. I never thought a place I dreamed about for years would turn into a battlefield, a broken bar, and then a sanctuary. When the HOA called 911 on me, I expected confrontation, threats, maybe even being turned away. But what I walked into that day changed everything I thought I knew about home, trust, and human kindness. Stay with me, I promise this story isn't just about a cabin. It's about what it means to truly belong. The sun had just begun its lazy crawl over the ridge, spilling golden light over the dense pine forest as I gripped the steering wheel, my heart thrumming in sync with the engine's gentle hum. For months, I had been plotting this escape, this move into my little cabin tucked away in the woods, a place I bought with my own two hands and dreams too big for the city streets. The air smelled of pine and soil, and for the first time in years, I felt free, like maybe life had finally let me catch a breath I didn't know I was holding. Yet, lurking behind that excitement was a tension I couldn't shake. My neighbor, or rather, the homeowners association, had made it abundantly clear that my presence here wasn't entirely welcome. Ever since I bought the cabin, there had been notes, emails, and even vague threats suggesting that I shouldn't disturb the harmony of the community. At first, I laughed it off, assuming it was just bureaucracy flexing its muscle. But last night, after a terse phone call from the HOA president, I learned they had called 911. Yes, the police, on me. Panic gnawed at the edges of my excitement. I tried to reason with myself as I drove. Maybe they just wanted to check permits. Maybe they'd come to mediate, not to kick me out. But the knot in my stomach tightened with every mile. When I finally turned onto the narrow dirt road that led to my cabin, I felt the weight of the world lift slightly. My little haven appeared just as I remembered it, sturdy wooden beams, smoke curling lazily from the chimney, a porch that begged for long, quiet mornings with a cup of coffee in hand. I parked the car and stepped out, taking a deep breath, trying to center myself. Then I heard the sirens. My pulse spiked, and my hands trembled as a patrol car pulled up behind me. Two officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts, eyes scanning the cabin as if expecting a crime scene. I swallowed hard and raised my hands slightly. "Hi," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just a broken bar moving in." They exchanged a glance, and in that instant, I braced myself for confrontation. But instead of harsh words or authority, one of the officers smiled a real, warm smile and motioned for me to follow them toward the cabin. Confused, I stepped closer. The front door creaked open, and standing there was a figure I hadn't expected. It wasn't the stern HOA president or some angry neighbor. It was Mrs. Callahan, the woman who had lived in this part of the forest for decades. Her hair was silver and braided neatly, her eyes kind but sharp, as if she could read my thoughts without me speaking a word. "Welcome," she said simply, and the tension in my shoulders faltered. "We were worried at first." "Sure, but you a broken bar, you're one of us, whether you know it yet or not." Confused and still cautious, I stepped onto the porch, my mind spinning. Was this a trap? Some HOA ploy disguised in friendliness? But the officers didn't move, just watched silently as Mrs. Callahan opened the door wider, gesturing for me to enter. And in that moment, a wave of emotion hit me, relief, disbelief, and a strange, tender warmth. This place, the place I had fought for, feared for, and dreamed about, it wasn't just mine. It belonged to a community willing to embrace me, even when the rules seemed to say otherwise. I realized then that moving into a cabin wasn't just about owning a piece of land. It was about finding a home, in every sense of the word, and sometimes, that meant letting go of fear and opening yourself to people you hadn't even met yet. I stepped into the cabin, the scent of pine and aged wood wrapping around me like a warm blanket. Mrs. Callahan motioned for me to sit at the small wooden table, where a kettle already hummed softly on the stove. The officers lingered by the doorway, their presence no longer tense but quietly observant. I still couldn't fully believe what was happening. How had a day that started with fear and dread turned into this moment of unexpected welcome? "You've worked hard to get here," Mrs. Callahan said, her voice gentle yet firm. "And sometimes, the world will try to scare you off, but real people will always recognize effort, heart, and sincerity when they see it." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I wanted to argue that I wasn't extraordinary, that I hadn't done anything special. But deep down, I knew she was right. Moving here wasn't just about owning a cabin, it was about courage, resilience, and hope, qualities that had carried me through years of city life, long commutes, and endless noise that drowned out my dreams. The officers spoke then, surprising me again. "We just needed to make sure everything was legal," one said, his tone now almost apologetic. "No crime here. And honestly, a broken bar, we've never met anyone quite like you before. This neighborhood a broken bar, it can be tricky. But you seem different. You're exactly the kind of person we want around." I blinked, overwhelmed. The fear I had carried for months, of the dread of confrontation, the worry about losing the place I had dreamed about, melted in the warmth of their honesty. Over the next hour, stories unfolded. Mrs. Callahan shared memories of her youth in the forest, tales of neighbors who had welcomed newcomers and those who had resisted change. I learned about the HOA's history, the misunderstandings, and the unspoken tensions that had caused them to react so strongly. By the time the sun was setting behind the trees, casting the cabin in a golden glow, I realized I wasn't just a stranger moving in. I was part of a living, breathing community, one that had once doubted me but was now opening its arms. The officers eventually left, leaving me with Mrs. Callahan and a sense of quiet triumph. I stepped out onto the porch, feeling the cool evening breeze brush my face. The cabin no longer felt like a house I had purchased, it felt like a home I had earned. I thought about the fear that had gripped me just hours earlier, the tension that had made my hands shake, and I realized how small it all seemed now. Sometimes, the obstacles we fear most aren't walls others put up, they're the ones we imagine ourselves. Mrs. Callahan placed a hand on my shoulder. "Every new beginning comes with a challenge," she said, "but the real test is whether you let fear dictate your life, or whether you take the first step and trust that the world can surprise you." And in that moment, I understood something essential. Life isn't about avoiding resistance, it's about walking forward anyway, even when the path is uncertain. Even when the world seems ready to push back, because it's on that path that we find connection, acceptance, and the quiet strength to call any place truly home. As night fell and stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds, I stood on my porch, gazing at the forest beyond. My cabin and my sanctuary stood strong, and I felt a surge of gratitude for every challenge that had led me here. The HOA had called 911, yes, but in the end, it wasn't fear or confrontation that defined this day. It was kindness, courage, and the human ability to see someone's heart, even before their actions could speak. I took a deep breath, letting the stillness of the forest fill me. I had moved in, not just to a cabin, but into a life I had always dreamed of. And in doing so, I had discovered the most important truth of all. A home isn't simply where you live, it's where you are welcomed, where you are seen, and where your heart can finally rest.